Alright, so you all have asked me if I can take a look at the taillight pieces. I'm not entirely sure what we're going to accomplish, but I decided to do it anyway. Before we jump into that, I just want to say that my son and I both appreciate all of the accolades for the 3D real-world modelling of the hair. But having said that, I don't know that we're going to get his attention for more than 3 seconds on anything else, because what I probably didn't say is that he hates true crime. It's not his genre. He doesn't like law, he doesn't like evidence, he doesn't like trials. It's all boring as bat's poo to him. So for this demonstration, you're going to have to handle my rudimentary clunky 2D drawings. If we had some specific thing that we wanted him to prove or disprove as far as physics goes or whatever, he might have been interested, but otherwise this is what we've got. So let's just start with a little bit of revision, for no particular reason other than Lally's latest gaslighting tour with Yuri Buchanek, still trying to convince us that we are looking at a broken tail light at 5:07 AM. So that's the photo on the left. And then the photo on the right is the daytime photo, well after the snow had melted. So the first exercise, I just decided to trace around the shapes that we can see in the daytime photo and see if they match the nighttime photo. Bear in mind that the nighttime photo is a slightly different perspective, because when Karen pulled out of the driveway that night, she was taking a closer circle towards the camera, whereas in the daytime photo it was further away from the camera. So we'll have to take this perspective difference into account while we're doing this exercise. So the first shape I'll draw your attention to is this darker red around the side of the quarter panel, and it's approximately this kind of shape. And then we'll try to match that kind of shape in the nighttime photograph, taking into account the slight perspective change. And as you can see, it is, as Lally would say, kinda sorta the same shape, which translated from Lally language actually means exactly. Now we'll focus on the amber colour, which wraps around the quarter panel towards the back. And we roughly end up with this kind of shape. Again, we will try to match that kind of shape with what we're seeing in the nighttime photograph, and again taking into account perspective change, and we can clearly see that that shape is also apparent in both photographs. This last shape, this little square on the corner at the back of the tail light, we'll come back to that right at the other end of the video, because I think Defence is making a specific point about that they'll come back to eventually. But the main reason I was showing you these two shapes is so that we can clearly define which parts of the taillight are being rebuilt when we look at the pieces. So here we're looking at the taillight housing with what red lens was left on it, and then the lab's recreation of the taillight pieces. And this is what we'll be focusing on to reconstruct the pieces that were found. Now, looking at the housing, we see this red shape of the lens left on it, and we're going to repeat the same exercise. We're going to trace out the shape that we're looking for, and then we're going to compare it to the nighttime photograph to see if we can spot that shape in the nighttime photograph. It needs to go right up here in this top right hand corner in the exact same position that it's depicted on the right, again taking into account slight perspective change. And again, you can quite clearly see that that shape does not appear on the Lexus in the nighttime photograph. Before we move on to the pieces that were collected, I just want to zoom in on the reconstructed pieces and just show you something that I noted. This jagged edge here on this part indicates to me an impact point. Where everything else is a clean break, this is a jagged edge. And again, we'll come back to this at the end of the video when we're looking at that little square that we haven't discussed yet. And here it is again in a different photograph, rotated 90 degrees. Something else to note about the pieces is that they weren't all photographed in the right direction. I suspect the lab simply put them down on the white paper in whatever direction they were most stable, because some of them are convexed shapes. That is, they're not all just flat shapes. And how I noticed this was looking at this particular shape here. You'll see this rocket shape, I guess you could call it, or bullet shape, and it's pointing to the right. And the black rubber seal is above it there. But if we're looking at the reconstruction photo, we can see that it's the other way around. Up the top here is the black rubber seal, and then this bullet shape is pointing towards the left. Now, if we were to assume it's just upside down, that would put the rubber seal in the wrong position. It would put the rubber seal at the bottom of the reconstruction instead of the top. And that tells me that the part was photographed from the inside rather than the outside, and so we're going to flip that around so the rubber seal is at the top and the bullet is pointing the right direction. This seems to be apparent in a couple of different photographs of the pieces, but I just wanted to show you with one piece how I determined which were flipped and which weren't. So the first way I went about this was trying to trace by eye where I could see the cracks. But as you can see here, I wasn't getting the same shape pieces. For example, down in the bottom right corner, you can see that there's a bump just above the bullet shape, and I couldn't see that on the reconstruction. So we had to go about this a whole completely different way. As it turns out, doing it this way is better because now we can assess who collected what, when, and give them our own labels so we can follow what's going on. And I'll just note here, I'm not going to do every single tiny itty bitty piece and clear pieces. It's just too hard to do in a 2D plane. So we're just going to focus on the larger pieces, and we're going to give them labels that we can actually see. Starting with the two pieces found by CERT on the 29th of January, piece A and piece B, followed by the large side piece found by Trooper Proctor on the February the 2nd, which I've labelled C. Moving on to the pieces found by Trooper Proctor on February the 3rd, I have labelled E and F, again ignoring all these tiny bits and clear pieces. Moving on to the next piece that Trooper Proctor found on February the 11th, labelled D, and then followed by his largest haul on February the 18th, G, H, I and J. Again, ignoring the smaller and clear pieces. What we're looking at here is the constructed piece in the middle that the lab put together, and then all those pieces we just looked at arranged around it, labelled A to J. And we can see that pieces A and B collected by CERT fit here and here. Piece C, as we've already discovered, fits over here. Piece D fits in here. E is inverted and it goes up here. F, I think, goes over here. G fits this part here. H below that, I over here next to the bullets, and J in between. I'm not sure we can draw much else from this other than what Yannetti has already asserted, and that is, with only pieces A and B, the lab could only confirm that the taillight had been cracked at some point. When the defence team came up with the video showing Karen reversing out of the driveway and hitting John's car, Proctor needed to come up with a lot more pieces, which diligently revealed themselves. Not that they're all just great detectives and discovered all this evidence while they were searching the crime scene. No. These pieces revealed themselves with no detective work whatsoever. The other notable thing here is that Karen had already been arrested, and by the time the lab had put this reconstruction together, it was almost a year after her arrest. So none of this evidence could have been used as probable cause. Not to seize her phone, not to seize her car, and certainly not to arrest her. As we found out with Proctor on the stand, all he had as probable cause to seize her phone and her car without a warrant was a missing shoe and a non-witness who said Karen thought she might have hit him. If you turn the entire reconstruction around and put it over the taillight housing, you'll see that it fits on there perfectly with the black seal at the bottom and those bullets pointing the right way on the side. And finally, the last piece we haven't talked about yet, which is this corner up here with the still missing pieces, also encompassing where I think the impact might have been with John's car. And you know I've already voiced my opinion about where that is, allegedly. I have a sneaky suspicion I know where those pieces of plastic are, the clear ones. See that pile of snow up against the fence? I bet they didn't look there, did they?